Welcome to episode 9 of the Believe in Balance podcast. I'm your host, Dave Dansereau. In this episode, I'm going to talk about using technology to bridge the gaps in stroke recovery and help survivors restore function to achieve balance after stroke. I'm writing about this now for my upcoming book, Closure After Stroke. In this episode, I want to talk about how do we measure and improve outcomes with tech-enabled solutions to overcome the Slinky effect. This content is also a reflection of my clinical observations made during 2 of my keynote presentations. One at the Advances in Stroke Rehabilitation Conference at the Southern New England Rehab Center entitled The Future of Home Stroke Recovery and Prevention, Wearable Connected Health Tools Fit, and the second at the 2020 Impact Conference in Mobile Health and Clinical Trials in Boston with my keynote on Let's Get Physical. How wearables can help with physical movement and rehabilitation. So the Slinky effect, as I described in my latest LinkedIn article and on my No Stroke blog on Substack, refers to the inconsistent and often regressive nature of stroke recovery, where patients experience periods of progress followed by setbacks, often caused by lack of services, especially in the later phases of longitudinal care planning and support. This is often where the Slinky bends towards the downward spiral in the rehab outcomes curve I demonstrated in my video, linked here on Substack, and I urge you to watch it. This phenomenon highlights the need for continuous, adaptive, and engaging rehabilitation strategies to maintain momentum in recovery and support survivors throughout their individual recovery journeys. Emerging technologies offer promising solutions to address these challenges, providing innovative approaches to enhance and sustain stroke rehabilitation. The sad reality is many of these tech-enabled solutions will never get to market, and when they emerge from university research lab, the challenge just begins. Getting these rehab tech tools and solutions into users' hands around their waist or their feet, and bringing rehab into their home so they can benefit is an uphill climb. Overcoming these rehab barriers in stroke is something I've been writing about and building solutions for during the last half of my career, and this will be a major theme in my upcoming new book, Closure After Stroke. I've been blessed throughout my long health and rehab career to have provided care in many roles, from corporate health, wellness, and research to hospital-based skilled inpatient, outpatient, and home rehab roles and settings, to owning multiple rehab and wellness private practices, to consulting in rehab tech with founders looking to understand clinical rehab workflows, to a clinical lead role at local university engineering department, innovating in their wearable biosensing technologies lab, and to teaching and mentoring at universities on digital health, volunteering for health advocacy and career mentoring in public schools, to a startup founder with many lessons learned in digital health and telerehabilitation, reimbursement, and barriers to care delivery. And finally, to a forever patient advocate to help my clients get access to these great technologies to take charge of their own health. I've seen and tried just about all of it, and that's why I've been sharing my lessons learned in my new book. Quote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it has to be lived forwards." This was from a Danish theologian and philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard. I've always wondered if this is where the late Steve Jobs got his famous quote about not being able to connect the dots moving forward. Either way, this quote resonates with me, and it is one of the opening lines in my book, because after all the roles I described I've played and worked through in my career, they all don't hold as much importance and meaning to me as my role as a stroke survivor, parent, spouse, and patient advocate. I've been down the road that many stroke survivors and care partners and families currently travel in their journey to restore balance to life after stroke, and can now look backwards and explain how we, meaning my family, faced and dealt with most of the obstacles that also doom many stroke rehab technology companies I have worked with. They failed or are currently failing because they were not only trying to connect the dots moving forward and secure the next grant, find a fast exit, or perhaps a paying customer. Many never really engaged or understood the patient voices, their why, and their real needs, even though they were to be their true, quote, customers, unquote. My mission in writing this book is to contribute all my lived experiences and expertise to help stroke survivors and families foresee and avoid the mistakes we had made as a family along the way in recovery, simply because we did not have a playbook for stroke. The end game goal is to leave a playbook in closure after stroke to help others increase their chances of success, both in recovery and primary and secondary prevention of stroke, with education about the emerging technologies and a call to action for access. I'll also be including my suggested solutions to offer the best evidence-based knowledge and practices to help survivors and their families get there. This book will also be a tribute to and for my family, who without them all, I wouldn't be here today, blessed to write this book. These reflections looking backwards will be my memoir or legacy of why I am now able to bring closure to stroke and begin to move and live forward. The bottom line, to reduce the Slinky effect and create steady long-term recovery, stroke survivors need more than innovation. They need access, both to the early stage and the solution side of design and ideation, and later longitudinal access to the data that tech might generate about their recovery trajectory. We don't need solution providers to just ask us for a snapshot in time. We need to be part of the process. Through a smarter pricing, education, clinical integration, and university industry outreach to ask for survivor support early and often, we can shift stroke recovery from an episodic siloed approach to care to a continuous journey. The tools and technologies exist. Now it is time to get them into the hands of those who need them the most. That's why I'm writing about it, and here's just a few of the tech-enabled solutions I know we can make work better for stroke care, because I've had the ability to use and share and work with these products while still serving my clients. Now it's time to scale the outreach and amplify the care impact. I'll be taking a measured look at tech solutions in the following categories in my book, as well as how to make these newer rehab technologies more accessible for transforming care into the home. Here's just a sampling and descriptive summary for this podcast and the article that will follow. The first category is wearable technology for home monitoring and real-time feedback. Wearable devices such as accelerometers and smartwatches, smart rings and wristbands for cardiovascular and sleep monitoring, Bluetooth-connected blood pressure cuffs, fall detection monitors, CGM or continuous glucose monitors for blood sugar and diet optimization. They all are now readily available and can monitor patients' movements, risk profiles, and physiological parameters in real time. This continuous data collection, in theory, could allow therapists and their medical teams to adjust rehabilitation plans based on immediate feedback, ensuring that therapy remains effective and responsive to the patient's needs. Tech-monitored rehab programs could offer a positive return on investment by reducing healthcare costs beyond simply falls readmission and could improve health outcomes for adults with existing chronic conditions for added secondary stroke prevention, risk reduction, and making it a compelling value proposition for both public and private payers. Integrating supervised exercise program referrals and tracking with electronic health records and clinical workflows can streamline adoption and enable data sharing between health system, patients, and community-based providers to monitor outcomes, which can further support reimbursement models and facilitate scaling interventions nationally and tracking long-term. In my book, you'll meet some stroke survivors who aren't waiting for healthcare to catch up here. Instead, they are optimizing or hacking their recovery with these technologies today. The second category is supported gait and robotic-assisted therapies. Robotic exoskeletons and assisted devices facilitate repetitive, precise movements. promoting neuroplasticity and motor relearning. These technologies support patients with severe motor impairments, enhancing their ability to perform daily activities and reducing the manual burden on therapists. In my book, I dive into my experiences with these technologies and the barriers to making them accessible at scale. I even go into how I created my own DIY gait training system at home using readily available items I found on Amazon. Category 3, virtual reality and augmented reality, VR and AR. VR and AR create immersive environments that make rehabilitation exercises more engaging and enjoyable. By simulating real-world scenarios, these technologies help patients practice functional tasks in a controlled, safe setting, improving motivation, allowing for dual task training, and improved adherence to therapy. I'll cover examples and case studies both from my private practice working with clients with mobility impairments from neurological disorders and stroke survivor stories from our podcast where VR and AR were a game changer and were effective in their rehab access, improving their outcomes. Category 4, functional electrical stim. Although FES is not new, functional electric stim uses electrical impulses to activate weakened or paralyzed muscles, aiding in the restoration of motor function, such as grasping and walking. This technique can be particularly effective in retraining voluntary motor functions and preventing atrophy in stroke survivors. I include many examples of this in my book, how I've worked with patients receiving these devices and having improved stroke outcomes. Category 5, telemedicine and remote monitoring. Telehealth platforms enable remote consultations, making stroke rehabilitation accessible to patients in various locations, mainly those who cannot get into clinic. Remote monitoring tools track patients' adherence to home exercise programs and provide feedback, ensuring ongoing support and adjustments as needed. I cover a full chapter on the untapped potential of integrating virtual care solutions and coaching, including the RTM pathways in support of home rehab models for stroke aftercare. Category 6, music-supported therapy. Music-supported therapy, also known as MST, involves exercises using electronic musical instruments to train motor skills by integrating auditory and sensor motor pathways. This approach has shown significant improvements in movement, speed, precision, smoothness in stroke patients. Music and rhythm played a big part in my own stroke recovery, and I will be highlighting how rhythm moved me to restore my gait and return to running. I'll also cover the technology behind MedRhythms, a company we featured on our podcast, and how they are scaling home gait recovery with music therapy. Final category, Category 7. Artificial intelligence, AI-powered rehabilitation platforms. AI-driven rehabilitation tools analyze movement patterns, track progress, and adapt therapy plans based on real-time data. These systems will eventually use machine learning to personalize treatment, ensuring that stroke survivors receive optimized exercises tailored to their specific needs and recovery goals. By integrating all these technologies and advancements into stroke rehabilitation programs, we can address the challenges posed by the Slinky effect, providing patients with continuous, adaptive, and engaging therapy options that they deserve that promote sustained recovery and improved quality of life. In my next episode, we'll learn about how to break down barriers, how to make neurorehab technologies like these mentioned accessible at home. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening. And my call to action is to subscribe to my No Stroke Substack so that you'll get the next article. And when I start dropping full chapters on this topic discussed today, you'll have free access. Thanks for listening.